Hi there and welcome to the next episode of the Planet Zoo Every Animal Franchise Zoo. Today I'm adding 5 new species and that's bringing us ever closer to completely finishing the zoo off entirely. So exciting times, Every Animal Zoo is almost finished. The first animal we're looking at this week is the Southern Cassowary. So one of the few bird species in the game that we've got so far. Just 2 cassowaries needed, and great news for these guys, they are a confident species, so not going to have to use any of the one-way barrier stuff. Location-wise, the cassowaries are a tropical species, so I've squeezed them up into the top end of the zoo in this little corner, so they're close to some of the other hot weather species, but you could say at this point, I'm more about filling the gaps that we've got left in the space that we've used for this zoo. Not as concerned at this stage whether the animals are fitting in, more that if you'll fit physically, then you'll go there. As I say, cassowaries are a great addition for the zoo. They're a confident animal and rarely get upset with visitors and stress. They can't jump very high either, so able to add a nice low fence that's nice and open, so guests are getting a fantastic view from pretty much the whole way around this enclosure. Design approach for the cassowary enclosure. Now, it's mostly flat in here. Depending on the animal that's going in, sometimes I will modify the terrain of an enclosure, so if it's a climbing animal or an animal that's based in a mountainous region, then I'll do my best to make sure the terrain's matching that. Now, for the Southern Cassowaries, I'm honestly not sure what type of terrain they're based in. They're a tropical species, and I know they inhabit rainforests, so I'm guessing they probably exist on more lowland areas of a rainforest. So I'm not too worried about setting this as quite a low terrain. I am also dealing with quite a restricted space here. We have limitations on the space available, so although the cassowaries, they do fit, they just don't have a lot of wiggle room when it comes to playing with the terrain. The hard shelter for the cassowaries, this time I've created a brand new custom shed. Of course, I've done plenty of sheds in this zoo before, but I figured there isn't much going on with the cassowary enclosure, so at least give them a custom building to sit in. This is made mostly with the conservation pack wood pieces. There's some really nice pieces in that, and I've also used a metal roof here. I feel this all fits in well with the cassowary's tropical habitat here. In terms of vegetation, the cassowaries love a lot of vegetation in their enclosure, so a great opportunity to add lots of those lovely tropical plants and trees there. So let's take a look around. Nestled in behind the cool cat centre there, I've managed to squeeze in the cassowaries. One of only a few bird species in the game, and a unique little character we've got here. Very colourful, with, I'd say, weird looking faces there, certainly. Related to the emu and the ostrich, apparently, but I guess they looked out in the colour varieties there. So, the enclosure itself, not a lot to say about this. It's basically just like the standard tropical habitat that I've gone for pretty much this whole zoo. Custom fence in this one, and that is using the Indonesian stone, which I guess is quite relevant considering the cassowaries can be from Indonesia. For plants in this one, I've put in as many as I was able to without taking up too much space. Any more than this and the cassowaries would have been complaining that they didn't have enough navigable area. So probably a little sparser than you get for the cassowaries in the wild, but I've made it do. Something special for the cassowaries, I did create a custom shed here for them. I've done a few of these before, but because this enclosure is looking quite empty, I figured I'd spend a bit of time and make something more custom here. So yeah, that's it for the cassowaries. So shall we move on to the next animal? Spectacled Caiman up next. We've built for the dwarf caimans before, and I suspect this is going to be similar requirements for this one. So 2 caimans, and let's just see where we're going to fit these in. So for spectacled caimans, there wasn't enough room left at the top of the zoo here, so we're back down at the bottom next to the jaguars. Hey, I guess that does fit in considering they're both South American animals. So setting this up, I suspected, and it is true, that the requirements for the spectacle caimans, this is very similar to the requirements for the Cuvier's dwarf caimans as well. So creating this habitat, I will admit I've done a little bit of copy and paste from the dwarf caimans habitat. Saved myself a bit of time there. Last couple of weeks I've been a little bit time poor in terms of time I've had spare to create stuff in Planet Zoo. So this week's enclosures, where I have been able to tap into something I've done before, I've certainly made use of that. It's actually a fair point to discuss. Now, working my way through the Every Animal Zoo, that's given me great opportunity to see what it takes to create a habitat for every animal in the zoo. After a while, I did start noticing there's many similarities between a lot of the enclosures that you create for certain species. As an example, the 2 crocodiles in Planet Zoo have very similar requirements. And the maned wolf and the dingo are very similar in terms of size requirements at the very least. Now, I'm sure this is by design, and this is why Planet Zoo has stuck around for so long and we've had so many DLC packs released. This is purely my own opinion and absolutely has nothing to do with statements of fact here. But how I see it, the base game, you've got those original animal models, and those obviously were created from scratch. What's come mostly after that is reskins with the DLC, so it's using one of the base game models and reskinning that for a new animal. When that's the case, the new animal is inheriting the animations, the space requirements, and the terrain requirements of the original animal, as I see it. Maybe I'm entirely wrong on this, but that's the way it feels anyway. My point is, when you get a new animal that's very similar to one of the existing animals, then you're kind of guaranteed that the habitat you create for the new animal, you may as well follow what you created for the previous animal, and you're going to end up with something that's roughly in the right dimensions for size and terrain and whatnot. Obviously some tweaks if it's a different biome and a different vegetation requirements, but for the most part, it feels like this is an easier way around this. Anyway, I'll stop rambling and we can take a proper look at the caimans. Sliding in nicely next to the indoor jaguar enclosure we built a couple of weeks ago, we've now got the spectacle caimans here. So yeah, obviously not intentional, but it is good to get some of the species together that belong to the same biomes close to each other. Right, so obligatory, let's go find and take a look at the caimans. There we go, enjoying the sun deck there. Just 2 caimans in currently, but if they are anything like the dwarf caimans, we will be inundated with baby caimans very shortly. It seems all the crocodilian species are very prolific breeders. So not very demanding, the caimans. We've got in a little mud bath for them that I've sunk into the rockwork here. About the biggest issue I had with the caimans, they need a lot of water space in comparison to land space. I should have remembered that from doing the dwarf caimans. Alas, I forgot and had to stretch the water out quite a bit further than I'd anticipated at the start. Oh, and seems to be a hit with the guests already. Getting some photos taken there. And what else? Oh, not a lot of vegetation in this one. The caimans aren't keen on that. We've got some water feature stuff in here, so the jetty bedding outside. They do also have some indoor bedding, even though they don't require it. But why not? When you're putting a hard shelter in, may as well put some bedding in there for them to have a nap as well. Right, so spectacle caimans in. Let's see what's next. Finally getting hyenas into the zoo. Been waiting so long for the hyenas to show up. A classic zoo animal right here. Now, interesting with the hyenas. So this is a spotted hyena, but next animal on the list is the striped hyena. So yeah, we've been waiting ages for one and ended up with 2 at the same time. So considering how similar both the hyenas are, they're from roughly the same regions and they've got the same requirements and vegetation and whatnot. For this, I'm going to do another dual habitat, so I'll be putting in both of these habitats at the same time. And they're going to complement each other, should I say. So, by creating for an African animal here, it's been a while since we've done anything with Africa. We've had quite a lot of tropical species recently and some North American stuff, but I think it's been a good few weeks since I've done anything for an African animal, especially doing one for the grassland biome. Hyenas aren't specifically that demanding. They do need more space than I would think they'd need, but I think that about a lot of the animals, so it's probably just me getting it wrong there. Both hyena species, the requirements are very similar. About the only difference, I think the striped hyena is a little less confident with humans than the spotted one. And the striped hyena gets a little more leeway in terms of how much vegetation they're allowed in their enclosure. And they've got more variety of the vegetation as well. I think the spotted one, we are limited to grasslands in Africa, whereas striped, I think you've got temperate as well, something like that. Anyway, considering they're so alike, that's what gave me the idea to do both of these enclosures at the same time. We're going to be using the same materials, and both of the enclosures are going to be a mirror image of each other. When I can, I do like having similarities in enclosures that are close to each other, and this is a perfect opportunity for that. We're almost done here, so let's take a look. So we're back with not just one, but two African species for the next build. This is both the spotted hyena and the striped hyena going into the Every Animal Zoo at the same time. And yeah, got to say, I've enjoyed building this dual enclosure for the hyenas. They're a good species to build for, not too demanding, and they do have quite good requirements for things like the vegetation and the space. Now, I've gone for quite a large indoor enclosure for the hyenas. This is a building concept I've used before for another hyena build, and it's using the Indian stone as a large shelter here. This is definitely helping with that mirror image for the two enclosures that I've gone for. In terms of viewing areas, there's a few different viewing areas for both of these enclosures. Biggest feature, I guess, is this open fronted glass section at the front, and this is both of the enclosures right next to each other. So if you're looking at one of the hyenas, you're going to be able to compare that with the other hyena right next to each other. I like that. Speaking of, here's the striped hyena. I'm definitely looking a little scruffier there than the spotted hyena. Quite a bit more bushy and bristly, I'd say. Going to make use of that indoor section there. Going to have a nap by the big windows. We'll leave them to it. So yeah, not a lot to say about the hyenas in terms of the vegetation used. I did stick with for the striped hyena, there was more options to use with vegetation, but I've stuck with just the Africa grasslands so that it looks consistent with the spotted hyena. And yeah, there we go. Classic hyena there, very sweet. Definitely one of the animals that you certainly want in a zoo. So glad we finally got there, and they are now in Every Animal Zoo. I think I'll leave them having a go at the prey sack there. It's certainly time, I would say, to move on to one more animal this week. Another one I've been waiting for. We're putting in the timber wolf. So back with a canine species, and we're back in the taiga tundra sort of biome as well. Yep, essentially cold and lots of pine trees, I guess. Now, in terms of where the timber wolves are going to go, I don't think they're going to fit in very well next to an African animal here. So I've saved a space for them somewhere where they will fit in a little better. Not long ago, we were working on North American animals, and this space at the end of the row, I've saved that specifically for the timber wolves. I've genuinely been looking forward to building something for the timber wolves because the last time I built something for timber wolves, it wasn't that great. When I created the North American Zoo way back when the North American DLC pack came out, I managed to cram every North American animal into that zoo, and I did put the timber wolves in, but they were certainly an afterthought. Now, something that's great for the timber wolves, they are very much okay with a lot of vegetation. So that creates a fantastic opportunity for making a lovely woodland forest habitat. Sometimes with the forest animals, it can be a little frustrating that they need a lot of space and they don't like too much vegetation, which leaves the enclosure looking really empty. I guess that's the same issue you come up with quite a few of the animals in the game. My biggest frustration in that regard, I guess I would put at the top, would be the maned wolves. A lovely species, lives predominantly in the grasslands of South America, that one. And the game is just so ridiculously annoying with that because it doesn't allow you to create a grassland, essentially. Similarly, the dingo is very empty environment. I mean, I know they live in desert dryland, but to me, still that means they're going to be surrounded by bushland and stuff. They're not going to be in completely sparse, blooming habitat, are they? This, I guess, is literally one of my biggest annoyances with Planet Zoo, the fact that I can't create some fantastic habitats with loads of vegetation applicable to the animal that I'm working on. And that's kind of influenced what I've decided I think I'm going to do for my next Planet Zoo project. I think I've decided I'm venturing back into sandbox mode, and I'm going to create what I would consider realistic habitats that match the animals' needs for the biomes that they're in. I've already started the prep work for this, and I've got a little spreadsheet going that lists every animal in the game and what regions and biomes they belong to. From this, I'll be creating little mini zoos that will have only the animals that are applicable to that biome and that region, and these will be enclosures that represent what that animal is about, based on real life requirements rather than what the game says the requirements are. So yeah, less time worrying about, I've got a plant in there that the animal doesn't like. More, I've got plants in there that represent how this animal would live in the real world. So yeah, in terms of a long-running series on a build concept, that's what's coming next in that regard. But I am going to need a bit of recovery time after finishing every animal zoo. This has been a project that's been ongoing for almost 8 months at this point. And I am certainly getting a little fatigued from the constant habitat creation. So what's going to happen is I'm going to take a bit of a break from the regular uploads, and it may be more sporadic for a couple of weeks where I'm going to wrap up the Every Animal series with a couple of tours and stuff. Then I want to look into doing some tutorials and concept videos, and there's also a couple of race videos coming up soon as well. It's really difficult to squeeze in both a regular series and the one-off stuff for me at the same time. I just simply don't have that much free time to do it. So I think concept for a month or two, maybe taking us into the end of the year, is going to be the big concept stuff. Maybe take on some big challenges and some big race stuff, hey? Of course, when and if we get new DLC, obviously we're going to have to bring back the Every Animal series and squeeze in the new animals into the zoo as well. There's no way I can end this off and not include additional animals as and when they come through, could I? Anyway, I'm getting away from myself again, so this is obviously... haven't talked much about the Timber Wolves getting developed, have I? But let's take a look at them anyway, and I'll show you what I've done with that. Here we go, Timber Wolf habitat sitting comfortably there opposite the seals and next to the reindeers. There was surprisingly a lot of space in this corner, a lot more space than the Timber Wolves actually need. So I've got a little area here for some food and drink shops, also some themed vending machines next to that, and a bit of a picnic viewing area there that takes you around, and you can see all the way around the Timber Wolf habitat from here. And yeah, can certainly hear those wolves sounding off there. They sure do like to vocalise their presence for us. One of their many howling choruses going on. It can get a bit annoying after a while, get sick of hearing that. But I'm not going to knock it. I think this is a nice feature they added to the game. I think it was about the time the Your DLC released. Just adds a bit of realism, doesn't it? The animals calling to each other like that. Although they are right next to each other, you could just look, you know. Oh well, leave them to it. So, kind of a woodland enclosure for the Timber Wolves here. For the hard shelter, I've got a hard shelter here at the back. This is kind of 2 buildings merged into one, so one side is the sleeping quarters, and the other side here, well, that's just where they get loaded into the habitat, and a bit more space there, isn't it, for them to have under a hard shelter. We've got a lot of vegetation in here, but I think I could still have added a bit more trees. I was just worried with that. I didn't want to eat into the wolves' navigable area and make it so that it was too small for them. That's always an issue, unfortunately, with the game. So a few less than I'd like, but way more lenient than some of the other animals we have to contend with, so I'm not going to complain again. So 5 more animals in Every Animal Zoo. Next time, well, there's not that many more animals left. Exciting stuff. Anyway, thank you so much for watching today. I'll catch you in the next episode.